Say what you want about Russell T Davies, the man loves an anagram season finale twist. I mean, I'm getting flashbacks to Bad Wolf already. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the latest episode of the latest series of Doctor Who. This one, the penultimate episode of the season, and the first part of a two-parter, The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Now, I'm just going to say this right up front. I'm going to have to do full spoilers on this one because this one is very clearly like paying off all the mystery boxes of this season and setting up for a big, hopefully bombastic finale. So just be aware of that. I'm going to go full in spoilers. I really am going to have to talk about it right up from the top. So just know that before we even start. Just generally, I will say this episode was fine for me. There was some cool stuff, and there's like even some creepy techno horror-y stuff that I love, like techno horror, totally my vibe. Which, by the way, check out my movie Identities coming out June 25th, which is 2 weeks from now, so a little less than that. It's coming out on Nebula, and if you like techno horror-y stuff, that's there for you. But regardless, enough about my stuff. I dig the techno horror vibe, and there were some cool aspects to that here. But for the most part, this episode really just felt like, as I said, just it was paying off all the mystery boxes. And in ways that, you know, while there is some fun to be had with trying to delve into them, didn't really feel like they all cohesed together in a way that felt narratively interesting to me as I was watching. Like every scene was just, and here's how we're going to start exploring this mystery box, and here's how we're going to explore this mystery box. And while there's a few character beats within there that I found to be interesting, none of them felt like they were driving anywhere other than to just drive this mystery box machine, which is unfortunate because, you know, I've been somewhat of a defender of the mystery box elements of the season. I don't love mystery boxes generally. I think, like, look at seasons of Star Trek Discovery, like season 3 and 2 were sort of big examples of this. Star Trek Picard also had some of these issues. I'm not always a big fan of that storytelling method, but I've been generally liking how Russell T Davies does it, in that he doesn't let it overwhelm the story too much. He just sort of has it sprinkled in the background, and we focus on the actual story being told. And here, I really got the sense that he just had too many mystery boxes. There was so many questions we have going on here. We have clearly the one who waits was sort of set up in the beginning of the specials. We have the next door neighbor. I even forget her name in this episode, but the next door neighbor of Ruby Sunday who comes back in this. We have the mystery of Ruby Sunday's birth. We have what's going on with Susan Twist, and so it's just all these mystery boxes coming up, and there's a question for me of like why are these all setting off right now? And the answer is they're setting off right now because the story needs them to set it off right now because that's what Russell T Davies wanted. But none of it feels natural. And I think like the biggest example of this is we start off the episode jumping into Unit. Really cool to see Unit again. I love this set. I love this team. I'm hopeful that we do get that Unit spinoff because I do love all the characters here. Was sad to say there wasn't, I forget her name, but the character who was in the wheelchair, with the rocket wheelchair that I loved from back in the specials. I was sad that we didn't get her. But the new additions that we get here, you know, like the child who I know is he's a famous actor in Britain. I know he's on Taskmaster for one of their specials, so I recognize him from that, but otherwise I don't know him too well. We get Rose back here as well. Love to see her. But yeah, I love this whole team. Loved seeing it. Was very interested in that. But we have the Doctor immediately coming in and saying, like, I want to find out about this Susan Twist lady. We've seen her throughout time, and I need to know more about her. And then they say, oh, yeah, she happens to be this tech mogul. We were already on her because she had an anagram for a name, which I was willing to be, I was about to be like, oh, come on, another anagram title at this point. But they did at least kind of put up, like, she just changed it recently. It put us onto her, so maybe she was looking for that attention. And potentially, given how the episode ends, it seems like that was the case. Like, she was trying to be a little bit overt with that anagram. So I was like, okay, I'm willing to forgive it if, like, she's trying to get caught. But then, immediately after that, the Doctor goes into, well, we also need to figure out what's going on with Ruby. And I was sitting here thinking, why do you need to do those two things at the same time? Right? There's no indication at this point. Like, clearly the story is going to have them be, but there's no real indication to me at this point that the Ruby mystery and the Susan mystery were related in any way, shape, or form. So for the Doctor to come in and be like, oh, we're doing both of these, felt a little weird to me. Now, again, I can possibly give a forgiving to it where there's this sense of the Doctor wanting to ask both of these questions, like might as well get him, ask him at both at the same time. There's no pressing desire on either of them. But when he saw that Susan Twist was like releasing something in the next few hours, this S-Triad technology. He should have been a little bit more on that, in the sense that he should have been more aware of, like, maybe we should focus on this first. The other thing, too, this is just a continuity thing for me. Russell T Davies himself pointed out, like, go back to the specials, and they mention at Unit that they use S-Triad technology, and see how that might be consequences for everybody. But if they know that S-Triad might be bad, then why would they be using it? That just feels silly. Anyways, I did like the allusion to, besides the obvious one, which, I little Russell T Davies digs in there are always fun. So yeah, the tying of all these mystery boxes together just didn't feel like it naturally flowed to me, and it just became the mystery box episode, where everything that we were dealing with is just like, let's just go and investigate the mystery boxes. And so we get the little stuff with Ruby going home. I forget her name, but Ruby's neighbor, who is clearly maybe a harbinger of some sort. That may be my guess, is that she's a harbinger of another god, maybe Ruby's mother, who is probably another god as well. But she's around, and she's a mystery boxing it up and giving weird, like, we don't always get what we want, tea, whatever thing to Ruby's grandmother. So there's that element of it. Also, here's another, this is just a weird trans thing. You have a bunch of characters, like, noting how beautiful Ruby, Jesus, I keep confusing them, Rose is. And that just feels like a little bit trying too hard to, like, acknowledge her womanhood. You know what I mean? Like, this happened to me a lot when I first came out as trans, that there were a lot of friends around me who were just like, whenever I put on makeup or a dress or whatever, like, you look really beautiful. And it felt very infantilizing, where it's just like trying too hard to admit, like, I see you as a woman. You're definitely a woman. Just want to know that I definitely see you as a woman, a trans woman. So it feels like the show's just a little too try-hardy with that. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive to it, but just the continual acknowledgement of Ruby's looks comes across as a little like rubs me the wrong way, and also comes across as tad sexist. Not that those two things can't be not unentwined. Like, those things come together technically around trans women. There's trans misogynoir is the thing. Anyways, that's just a sidetrack. The bit, though, when we go to the time window, loved all of this. Like, just the idea of a time window, the visuals of how it's depicted as this, like, the whole landscape is kind of techie and glitching a little bit, like, very much my techno horror vibes. Loved that. And I love the tension being built up here, like when the doctor says, like, just go and look, see what she's pointing at. And you see this guy go around the TARDIS and doesn't come around. I'm like, oh, he is dead, and no one has noticed. I've seen enough of Silence in the Library and enough Doctor Who of other sorts to know that when you don't see them come around and they say they're fine, they're probably dead. Angel Bob is another one that was kind of like that. That's a Moffat trick, technically, that Moffat likes to use. The Science Library was a similar thing, too. It's like, oh, the guy that got sent in and you don't pay attention to, he's probably dead now, thing. So, interesting Russell T Davies is using that similar trick here. But yeah, the whole sequence was tense. I like trying to see what Ruby's mother looked like was creepy. The entity around the TARDIS was also super creepy. Loved just all of that, and like asking is it in 2004 or not. Like, all of this was a lot of fun. I also really loved the depiction of Kate here as someone who wants to protect each and every one of her soldiers, and even getting upset at the doctor at the end there, being like, you sent, she doesn't say it, it's all told in a look, but it's clearly she's pissed off the doctor got one of her soldiers killed. And I like that coming off of the scene earlier where she says, I think you bring joy, when the doctor says, like, I think I bring disaster. And so it's a nice little play with that element, and were the two character beats that I thought this episode really sold very well. And I'm glad that Kate got it, because the other element of this that I'm always frustrated with Kate is that they always bring up the Brigadier, like, oh, look, I knew her father, my father was a great man, he told me about you. And it's like, let Kate, like, I get it, she's related to the Brigadier, we like the nostalgia, but like, she's her own character, let her be her own character. She's been in enough episodes, we don't need to constantly, like, I get it, she's related to that guy, we don't need to constantly bring it up. She's allowed to be her own person with her own opinions on things. So I did at least like that we got a little bit more like actual character from Kate and who she is and how protective she is of her unit. That loved that. That was great. The stuff with Susan Twist, as it relates to her possibly being the doctor's granddaughter, I I just like, is that just what was the point of just relating that to his granddaughter, right? Like but the only reason I can think of like having that bait and switch is that Susan will come in some shape or form next episode, potentially even being Ruby's mother. That may be the case because, and I hope so, because it would be really weird to just have this whole like, maybe she's Susan, maybe she's the Susan character, and have her not be at all, and then that's just the end of that. Like, I really hope they are building something like that. It's hard for me to judge that at the moment, but even then, even if they do bring Susan in another capacity outside of Susan Twist, I'm still kind of like, why was that the connection made? You know, I get it. There's some line of it, but again, it feels like a little bit of like, let's force this a little bit down the path that we want to tell for this story instead of it feeling a little bit more natural. The other thing too, and maybe, again, this is mystery box stuff, maybe it'll get explained next episode, but why Susan was having all the dreams of the different, versions of herself. Like, I get that's an explanation for, like, the how of it, but not the why. And there is an element of like, oh, the god of death that we get to meet at the end of the episode. Maybe that's why, but there's no logistical reason. Like, why would the god do that? Why would he put these like harbingers around? And I guess Susan's not even a harbinger. She's just a weird death god thing. I don't know. Like there's the god of death around the TARDIS, and then there's Susan Twist, who also seems to be a murder zombie for reasons. Again, I'm trying. It's really hard to review this because it's sort of like these are paying off mystery boxes that we've been building up, but we still don't have every answer yet. And what's upsetting about that to a degree is that this episode should have been the mystery box payoff episode, right? And then we get to have fun next episode. But there's still some logistical nonsense that I feel like we're still going to have to work out next episode. And it's going to take away, and it's just be a lot more mystery box payoff as opposed to like, tell me a story that I'm intrigued by. And that brings me, I feel like I'm complaining a lot about this. Again, there's an element of like, if this pays off well, I'll forgive a lot more of this. And there are elements I like. Love the techno horror stuff. But overall, it's just hard to judge this episode on its own. So I'm nitpicking a little bit because that's where we're at. But that does bring me to the big reveal at the end that the one who waits is the god of death, Seekth, or something like that. I don't know exactly that. The anagram line was dumb because technically, like, yes, you can make his name out of some of those letters, the Susan Triad technology or whatever it was, S Triad technology. But that's not really an anagram. That's just like using some of the letters that are there. It's not like you could. An anagram, I think, uses like all the letters that are there technically. So that like, oh, it was the wrong anagram. I'm like, was it though? Was it though? Was it though? You're trying to play like you're clever and you're not, it wasn't that clever. The other thing too is it's played as like this big moment, and this god, I don't know. Like, I don't know this god at all. So I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I'm sure I know there's an episode, I looked it up, of classic Doctor Who way back in the day that this character appeared in, and he's been in a few like audio serials and novelizations and stuff. So like the character existed before this. Just like the toy maker was in The Giggle. So like makes sense. But the fact that this plays is like, oh look, it's this guy moment, and I'm just sitting here like, I don't know who he is. But to a degree, I'm willing to forgive that in a sense, because I do remember my own childhood when I was growing up watching Doctor Who, and they had these moments where it was like, oh, it's the Master, sort of surprise reveals of things. And I remember as a kid not knowing who the hell the Master was, but then getting to like, and then it's like, oh, but I learned through the episode. So like, oh, this is who the Master is. But like other Doctor Who fans were like, oh, it's the Master. So like, there's an element of it like forgiving, like it's the Thanos effect. Like people who didn't know who Thanos was at the end of Avengers see him, and then other people explain. And so like, there's a big buildup from. But the distinction I would make here's, I think it's better done like in the first season of Doctor Who way back, like the first season of modern Doctor Who, old modern Doctor Who, where we got the episode Dalek that introduced us to the concept of the Daleks and said, like, this is the last one. And then we had the season finale where we got, there's actually a whole lot of Daleks that survived the Time War. So you at least, as an audience member who didn't know the Daleks, like I was a young kid, didn't know who the Daleks were at that point, I at least had a context for their big reveal at the end of that season that I don't really have for this guy. So the Master one is somewhat more akin to it, but still, this big reveal of this character just didn't land for me, especially with all the mystery box, like, ooh, I wonder who it is, elements around him. So it just came off a little bit anticlimactic. That said, the build-up to that moment was really cool. The Harriet, like, being like, oh, H. Harbinger, and it's like, oh, it's Harbinger, just always in plain sight that. I was like, oh, okay, that was fun. Her, like, listing off a bunch of different names of different gods. I'm like, ooh, I hope we get to see some of those. Those sound interesting. I'm here for that. Was properly tense. It just kind of all landed with a little bit of a thud when we got the name at the end there, when this big, like, Egyptian-looking god guy sort of at the end sort of appearing. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the guy we're dealing with. And then Susan Twist turns into a zombie monster. And is definitely not Susan, the doctor's granddaughter. I also like the reveal that, like, the doctor hasn't had kids yet, but he does have a granddaughter. That felt timey-wimey in a fun way. That was interesting. I'm trying to think of what else is going on here. Like I said, it's a lot of mystery boxes. It's hard to really articulate strong feelings about the episode because I don't have part 2, but all I could really say is this felt like a lot of mystery box filling, and it's really going to land on how this ends, because otherwise it's just like a bunch of mystery boxes firing off, and there's some cool tense moments, but ultimately not super satisfying, and in some ways anticlimactic as someone myself who's not a big classic Who fan. Even someone who I've watched Doctor Who my whole life, like since Doctor Who came back to TV, modern era. I've watched every episode when it aired, every time. So I would call myself, a lifelong fan, but I'm just not a classic fan. Just haven't watched much of it, and so it did land a little bit flat for me. I'd be curious to hear if you're a classic Who fan. Does this reveal like land for you? Because if it does, I'm all here for it. For me, I was like, okay, cool. We'll see what he does next week. Let's see if the payoff is interesting. But yeah, we shall see. That's everything there. All right, everybody. Hope you all live long and prosper. I'll see you next week for the season finale of Doctor Who. And again, please consider signing up for Nebula for my movie Identities. For those of you who haven't heard about it, there's a trailer down below. We are trying to make this into a TV show. This is a pilot for hopefully a series. So the more people who sign up, the more people who watch it when it releases on June 25th, the better chances of that my personal dream being able to come true is happening. So please consider it. And again, if you do sign up, use the nebula.tv/identities link, because that'll be how Nebula knows that you're signing up for Identities. So yeah, hopefully we get that TV show. Enough about me, enough hawking my wares. I'll see y'all next week. Live long and prosper, everybody.